Hello, everybody. I think I'm live. I'm going to do some quick pre-show checks before I start talking about interesting things. Make sure it looks like I'm actually live, because I've had this bite me in the past. Am I live on LinkedIn? I think so. Maybe not. Yes, I'm live on LinkedIn. I see I have one viewer right now. That's great. Welcome. Still a couple minutes early, so I'm not going to start yet. Let me check YouTube. YouTube says I'm live. I think we're live. Yeah, great. So, like I said, I'm a little bit early, so I'm going to wait just a moment to let a couple people join before we start. Thanks for joining. If you're here, say hello in the chat. I like to hear from my audience, and I'm sure that many of you kind of just half listen, and that's cool too. Because whenever I ask for people to say hello, I get a small percentage of respondents. But anyway, I like to hear from you. I've been off for a few weeks. I was on holiday. My mother and brother were here visiting from the U.S., where I'm from. I'm living in Europe now. We spent a couple weeks together, did some traveling, did a road trip to Berlin, and some other sightseeing in the area. So that's the reason I haven't done it for a while. And then my last scheduled live stream, I think I was feeling sick, so I just didn't do it. So it's been almost a month now since I've done this. So anyway, looks like we're right on the dot now. So I'm going to get started here in just a moment. One quick note, I don't think this is relevant to anybody listening, but if it is, I'm available for hire. I'm looking for some new clients. I was waiting for my my holiday to end before I started trying to find new clients. But if you or your team could use some Go expertise, reach out. Let me know. I'd be happy to work with you. All right, I got some people on chat. Hey, Jonathan, is it cool if I slip in a question? It is absolutely cool if you slip in a question now or at any time during this live stream. I love to answer questions. It's cool. It's bonus points if they're about Go or programming, but they can be about anything. So it looks like I don't know who this is. GK. Hi, GK. Yes, you can ask a question. And then I'm gonna. Oh my goodness, how do I say this? I don't think I know the pronunciation of these letters. Remiguyis. I'm sorry. I know I said that terribly. Anyway, I'm glad you're here. Welcome. Can I call you Remy? Is it for short? Is that acceptable? I think I can say that. Anyway, today I'm going to be working on my open source database project, which I've worked on many of these live streams in the past. So if you've ever watched me before, that shouldn't be a surprise what I'm working on. But I have made a lot of progress since the last time, so it's going to be a little bit different area of the project. But let me start to pull that up on my screen and get started while I'm waiting for this question to come in. Alrighty. Get my console up. Make sure which branch I'm on. It looks like I'm on the right branch. Let's pull up an editor. Editors are nice. Actually, so one of the things I've done on this project since the last time we spoke is I created a new module, a new Go module within the repo. So I'm going to open my editor there instead. You'll see there's a go.mod file here. Remy B? All right. Nice. So that's why I'm opening my editor here in this directory rather than the top level directory. All right, we got the question. Whoops, hang on 1 second. When Go compiles a package, does it still generate assembly, which is abstracting multiple hardwares? I believe it does, yeah. So there's a couple phases that happen when you're compiling a Go project, and I don't know if it's the first phase, but one of the first phases is to convert the Go code into, I don't even know what it's called, but it's not really assembly. It's like Go assembly. I don't know if they even call it Go assembly. Let me just try to look that up here quickly. It's like assembly, but it's like an abstracted version of assembly. So it's kind of hardware independent assembly is kind of the idea. Yeah, just like it says right here. The most important, let me zoom in a little bit. The most important thing to know about Go's assembler is that it's not a direct representation of the underlying machine. Some of the details map precisely to the machine, but some do not. This is because the compiler suite needs no assembler pass in the usual pipeline. I don't know if I care about those details right now. But yeah, it does, as far as I know, in every case, it does convert the Go into assembler before it then goes from assembler to the actual machine code. Yeah. Is there a reason you're asking? I'm curious. But yes, it does do that. Yeah, so the follow-up question is Go tool compile minus capital S generates the hardware independent assembly. I believe it is the hardware independent assembly, yes. Let me see if I can verify that. I don't think it uses hardware dependent assembly directly anywhere, really. Go tool compile minus S. A better way is on the command line. We just minus help. I don't see minus. Oh, here it is. It just says assembly listing. I'm pretty sure that's the generic sort of hardware independent assembly. Yeah. Kigfa, love the name. I hope that's not the real name, or if it is, I'm sorry for pronouncing it wrong. You're welcome for the stream. I'm glad you're starting with Go. If you have questions, let me know. Does the linker create machine-specific assembly? No, the linker, I don't believe so. The linker links the dependencies, which we're getting out of my understanding here, by the way. So I'm a little bit out of my depth with the answer to this. But no, the linker does not do that. I'm not sure exactly what does. Let me see if I can find a resource that might help explain some of this. Actually, that one I was just looking at might be the one. You know what? I bet ChatGPT can do this quickly. Just press random buttons creating username. I love it. I don't feel so bad about potentially mispronouncing Kigif then. At what point in the Go compilation process is Go's hardware independent assembly converted to machine code to hardware specific code? Let's see what this says here. It's not saying anything. What's wrong here? It's like it locked up. Also on ChatGPT 3. I don't want that. I want the good stuff here. Okay, I don't know what's wrong here. Copy. Try refreshing the page and see if it helps. There we go. Now it's awake, maybe. Just parsing, type checking. Intermediate representation. Code generation. Okay, so I don't know if assembly and linking are both done by the linker. I don't think they are, but it's closer to that stage when it happens. And to be clear, I don't believe it ever actually writes to a machine-specific assembly. It writes to machine-specific machine code. And the difference might seem subtle or insignificant, but there is a difference. I mean, assembly is often thought of as just writing machine code. It's not. It's usually not quite that simple. Assembly language usually includes like simple macros and some very and more advanced assembly languages include even like sort of variable names or whatever, so you can like put a name on a thing so it's easy to reference it, so you don't have to just use like register 12 or whatever it's called. The only assembly I've ever done was back on an 8088, I think. And it's been so many years I don't remember the details, but assembly is more than just writing machine code. So if you're thinking of assembly and machine code as synonymous, then I suppose you could think of the linker or this assembly and linking step, whatever that actually refers to, that ChatGPT is talking about, as being the thing that goes from the Go's general assembly to the machine specific assembly. But really, I don't think there ever is a machine specific assembly phase. However, there is machine specific assembly in some cases, perhaps if there's need to do that for a specific architecture. Some of the low level hardware details probably do that. I mean, I don't know this for a fact. I'm guessing, but it seems kind of obvious that would be necessary in some cases. If you're writing, I don't even know if Go supports the 386 SX processor, for example. But if it does, which doesn't have a floating point unit, then something needs the floating point math needs to be done somewhere, and I would imagine it's done in 386 assembly code. For the 386, not the Go assembly code. I might be wrong about that, but I'm assuming and guessing that there are some cases, either for very specific hardware interactions, or for potentially for optimizations where there's some very specific a use case for writing highly optimized machine specific code, but that wouldn't be going from Go assembly to machine assembly. That would just be written in the machine assembly in the Go compiler somewhere. I would guess that's happening. I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. All right. Let me back up. I think I jumped over a couple of comments and questions. Let me get those going before let me go back and get those before I continue. What are we doing today? That is a great question. We're adding a feature to Kivik. I'll talk about that in a moment. Dummy Pizza Guy, hi. Did you bring pizza? I'm getting hungry. All right. Back in dev in Go. Physics Akada says he's a back in Go and back in dev learning Go. Awesome. Currently intern at a startup. Well, congratulations for finding an internship. If you have questions today, please let me know. And then a final comment on the thread about assembly and everything. The comment is, thanks a ton, Jonathan. We'll continue my digging. Generally curious about how Go supports cross compilation via this hardware independent abstraction. Yeah, it is an interesting way they do that. Of course, Go isn't the only language that does this. GCC supports far more hardware platforms than Go does, and they do a different approach. I don't know what their approach is exactly. I know less about that. But anyway, so let's get started. I'm going to do a really quick high-level overview of what the project I'm working on is, and then I'll talk about the feature I'm adding, because I know there's new people today, and you don't have any idea what I'm talking about. So I'm not going to assume that you've been watching the previous live streams. So I am the author and maintainer of this library. It's called Kivik. It's a SDK, if you will, for CouchDB. CouchDB is a NoSQL database. It's very similar in many ways to MongoDB. It's open source. It's an Apache project. And I use it for, I actually don't use it for an active project right now, but I was using it for a project at the time I started creating this. But there weren't any good Go libraries for it. So I wrote one, and now I maintain it. And I have, I don't know, 300 something people starring it. 200, almost 300. If 3 of you want to go click star, I'll have 300. Almost 300 people on GitHub have started. So it's not like a super popular project, but I keep adding features to it because I enjoy doing that. The feature I'm adding right now, and I have been for several weeks, it's been the topic of the live stream for a while, is I'm adding a new backend. So I guess I should back up a little bit there. I use the same general sort of model that the SQL database drivers use in the Go Standard library. So if you've ever used database SQL for MySQL or Postgres or SQLite or anything like that, you have at least a high level understanding of what this is. The basic point is that there's a single interface, the SQL interface, that you can use regardless of what your backend database is, whether it's MySQL or Postgres or whatever. There are nuances that change between, but in general, it's the same API, right? So that's the way Kivik works. Is it has a single front end, I'll call it, that gives you. In fact, we can pull it up here so you can sort of see what it looks like. This is the Go doc for Kivik. So you get it's kind of similar to SQL. You have a client object, and on the client you have different methods. You can create a DB object on it there, and then on the DB you have different methods and so on. And you can have different backends. Most people, of course, use the CouchDB backend because that's what it's designed for. But I intentionally designed it to be modular so I could use different backends. And now I'm creating a new backend that's based on SQLite. The purpose of this is for testing. So if you're writing an application that uses CouchDB and you want to write some unit tests that use CouchDB, but you don't want to go to the effort of installing CouchDB either through Docker Compose or whatever, you could just use this new SQLite driver to do all your tests sort of locally, maybe in memory, maybe on a file system. That's the goal. Okay. Now I've been making progress on this, and actually it works. I have a lot of the features done, but today the feature I want to work on, I should pull up the CouchDB documentation, is one about gathering statistics about views. My mind is blanking suddenly about the URL. Docs, there it is, docs.couchdb.com. All right. Built in views. So I guess I should talk about what views are because that's going to be relevant to the code I'm adding today. So CouchDB lets you specify sort of custom JavaScript functions that read a document and transform it potentially. It's called a map function, and then you can have so you can do map reduce, right? So that's the map part. Then the reduce part, you can create a reduce function that does something like count how many documents you have, or all of the order totals, or whatever. You can arbitrary stuff. It's custom JavaScript. But there are a few built-in of the reduce functions, and I want to implement one of those today. So let me find those are. I don't remember where they're listed. Apparently not here. Here we go. All right. So there are I think 4 built-in reduce functions. I've already implemented the simple ones. Count was really simple. I'll show you on the screen in a moment what I've done, but I've already implemented count. I already implemented sum, also very simple. I started to implement a prox count distinct and got kind of confused. I mean, I think I know how to do it, but it's going to require some extra work. So I'm going to get to that later. So today I want to work on stats, which is kind of like count and sum together plus extra stuff. And I don't know if we're going to finish this today because I think there's a lot of subtleties in it, depending on the types of inputs, which we'll talk about. But that's what I'm going to work on today. So we're going to start with basically this shows a very minimal implementation in JavaScript. Let me zoom in a little bit. And in fact, we want to implement this in Go in a way that it implements with my software. All right. A lot of background there. Let's get started. There it is. All right. So I said I was going to show you the count and sum functions. All right, so here is the count function right here. So this is a good chance to talk about the inputs to this function. It has 3 arguments, right? Keys, values, and re-reduce. Ignore re-reduce for the moment. Keys is an array of 2-element arrays. Okay. The first in each of those in each element of the parent array, the first item is a document ID, and the second one is a key that was emitted by the map function. So remember, the map function is an arbitrary thing that the user can create. Let me show you an example of one. Here's one right here in my test. This is a super simple one. It emits two things. It emits, this is a bad example. I mean, it does emit two things, whatever, it doesn't matter. So this one emits, this is a different one, but it emits the document key, if it exists in the document, and the number 1. So in this case, the key would be considered doc.key, and the value would be 1. You can emit whatever you want there. The important thing is that the key is what you look it up by, and then the value is the thing that gets looked up. For our purposes, what matters is that this first argument is an array of document IDs and those keys. I shouldn't move that. And then the second value is an array of values, that is, these things. So they kind of correspond to each other. I don't know why they did it this way, why we have an array of arrays and then an array. Why don't we just have one array of 3-item arrays? I don't know. Well, actually, I think I do know, but I'm getting ahead of myself. But that's what they do. The point is that, maybe if I make a comment, it'll be clear what I'm trying to illustrate. We essentially have 3 items per document being passed here. We have ID. Let me see. ID, key. And then we'd have ID, let's say this ID 1 and key 1, ID 2, key 2. So this is part of the keys argument. And then values gets value 1, value 2, etc. So do you see how they sort of correspond to each other? That's our inputs to this function. That's the point, okay? Now, this third argument I'll talk about now, that's re-reduce. Sometimes this function gets called on its own outputs. So this function takes this stuff and it outputs a single value. It outputs a value or values, actually. It could be an array of values. So it converts this to value X, possibly value Y. Typically, it's a single value, but you could do an array. The point of a reduce function is to take a number of things and reduce it down into one, like such as an aggregate, a count, a sum, something like that. Further, you might have thousands or even millions of documents, and you don't want to pass millions of array keys into a single invocation of this function, so it'll call it on, like, I don't know, 100 or 1,000 at a time, okay? So then you need to call re-reduce in that case. So let's say you have 1,000 documents, so you call this function 10 times, each with 100 documents. So now you have 10 return values. Then it will call itself again. It will call reduce again. This time keys will be null, and values will be whatever values were returned by those previous 10 calls. So we'll have value X, value Y, value XX, value YY, etc. And then it's expected to return another reduction of that to maybe the final value. Okay? Re-reduce will be true in this case. Re-reduce will be false in this case. And this is, just dawned on me earlier, this is why keys and values are passed separately, because keys are null in this case, but values is not. All right. There's a lot of background there. So here, now maybe I can explain what the count function does here. If it's not in re-reduce mode, then I just return the number of values that I received. because I'm counting them, right? So I expect one value per document. I'm counting documents. So if I get 6 values, that means I had 6 documents, so I just return 6. If I'm in re-reduce mode, then the semantics change. Then the values aren't arbitrary values from documents. They are the values that were returned by this function previously. So in that case, I need to loop over those, iterate over those, and sum them together. So that's what this does, right? I have a total. I range over the values. I convert the value to a uint64. This is just a function that uses some reflection and type assertions, and then I return the total. So that's what that does. That's how count works. Sum is very similar. It's basically just this, because in the case of sum, I'm not counting values. I'm summing the everything that was in the values. All right. Now for today, I need to build this. Or is it stats? I need to build stats. What does it do? Stats computes following quantities for numeric values associated with each key: sum, min, max, count, sum square. I guess that's a square root of the sums. And that would be useful for calculating like standard deviation and stuff like that, statistical things. And then this is the weird part. The behavior of stats function varies depending on the output of the map function. The simplest case is when the map phase emits a single numeric value for each key. In this case, stats function is equivalent to the following JavaScript. So I'm going to start with that, and then I'll worry about the rest here, okay? I don't want to take off more than I can chew at once. So I'm going to start by writing a test case that matches this. So here, the simplest case is when the map phase emits a single numeric value for each key. Let's write a test that does that. I'm going to make this the whole screen so it's easier to read. Okay. So I want to do stats with single numeric value from map function. Good enough. Now I'm going to copy some boilerplate from up here. I'm going to modify this. So this does emit a single value, just the number 1. That's probably good enough. And then this reduce should be stats. Okay, and then I need to actually return the test instance here. Group level shouldn't matter right now. Okay, and then here's where I put my expected response, which I don't actually know what that is yet. It's an object that looks like this is what it is. So let's try to build that object. We have keys sum, which should be 1. Min, which should be 1. Actually, I don't know if it should be 1. I haven't created any documents. Let me create a couple documents. I'll just create 2 for this this test. Let's call them A and B. Keys, yeah, that's fine. It doesn't matter. So the min will be 1 because I'm doing 1 in every case here. That's fine. It doesn't matter. Max will also be 1. Count will be 2. And then sum square. I don't actually know what that is because I'm not know what that's supposed to be. B plus sum square. Is that a JavaScript function? I can't. Okay, no. Well, this is the re-reduce case. Okay, here. This is what I need. This is the reduce case, or not re-reduce case. So it loops over the values, and for each one, Oh, it sums the square, not the square root. It just sums the square. So in this case, it's going to be 2 because 1 times 1, the square, 1 squared is 1 plus 1 squared is 1. So 2 is going to be the answer here. Okay, that's good enough. Now, this is going to fail because I haven't written any of this code yet. And there it fails. It fails because it thinks stats is not defined. I wonder why it thinks that. Perhaps because it's not. Well, let me add my test here. First, let me make a branch. Stats, built-in stats reduce function. A failing test for stats reduce function. All right. So it's failing, as we expect, with this. But let's make it not fail that way. And that's the whole goal of today's session, right? Now, the first thing I'm going to do is just put a stub in here. Let's make a return a function. That seems legit. Now, I can just make this return the object, right? And I think that's exactly what I'm going to do to start with. Turn map, string. These are all numbers. I guess I could do a float. This does something interesting. It's comparing against infinity. I don't think that matters for my case, though. Okay, I'm thinking as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking of some cases I want to add, but as a to do. So let me create that here. Null. So I want to consider what happens if the key or the value is null. And I don't know the answer yet, but I'll figure it out, right? Like what if all of the values are null? Then what is the sum? Is it 0? Is it null? I'm not sure. What's the min, max, etc. Need to figure that out. I'm gonna add that to my to-do list so I can worry about that later because it's not part of this test case. All right, I want to make this just so I'm not going to worry too much. My concern was should this return floats or integers or both? I'm going to do ints right now, and then I'm almost certainly going to change that. But for now, it should satisfy the test. That's why I'm going to do it that way. Okay. Now I want sum. So you know what? I'm not going to do a map. I'm going to do. I just changed my mind. Well, no, I'll go ahead and do it this way, and then I'll explain why because it's going to fail, and then I'll explain why I was thinking of changing it. I'll do it separately. 1 max 1 count should be 2. Sum square should be 2. Okay, this should make the test pass, except that it won't. And you'll see why in a moment. All right, you see why it's failing? Because the key order is different. I believe Go will alphabetize map keys when outputting. It looks like count, max, min. Yeah. So I could just alphabetize them in my test case, but that feels like cheating. Like it's not the right solution really because it's a map. It's technically arbitrary. So instead, what I'm going to use a struct here. And the reason to do a struct is because when I JSON marshal a struct, it uses the order that the struct fields are defined. It also will allow me to use either integers or floats or whatever I want. I probably need floats here in every case, but I'll worry about that in a moment. So let me create a type here. Let's call it, I'll just create it inline here because I don't need it anywhere else. Type stats, you guys call it stats, right? And Copilot seems to be doing the right thing. So far, min, max, count. Yeah, that works good enough. I mean, I know I need to change those types, but I'll worry about that later. Let me just do it in the right order again. Sum 1, min 1, max 1, count 2, sum square 2. Should pass now. All right. Make stats work naively with, yeah, that's good enough. Okay. So I suppose I should add to my to-do here, floating point values, negative values. So yeah, let's do negative next, because obviously this is not going to work. I used uint. That won't work if I emit a negative value. But so let's do that. Let's copy this test and then modify it. Now I don't want to just change this to -1. I could do that, but I want to make this a little bit smarter. So I'm going to have this emit doc.value. So I need to add a value to each of these, right? So value, let's do value is 1 there, and value -1. I need to change this to interface. Okay, so now my expected output would be minimum is -1, max is 1, count should be 1. That should all be the same. Sum should be 0 now, because 1 plus -1 should be 0, right? Yeah, values is unused. I don't care. Well, I do care about that, actually. I will care about that in just a moment. So this is going to fail now. Whoa, it failed in a different way than I expected. Stats with single numeric. Oh, it's because I redefined the same test. So let's do stats with negative and positive values. Let's do it like that. All right. Now this is the kind of failure I would expect, because we're just returning a canned answer, which is dumb, frankly. That canned answer only works in one particular case and not here. So sum is 0, or is 1, we expected 0, etc. So let's actually add some logic now to this function and see if we can make it do something interesting. So I'm going to ignore the, let me think how I want to do this. I don't know if I want to actually ignore that. Let me look at what we do here. I'm not going to ignore that. I'm gonna what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? Our result stats. Let's do it like this. If, let's call this re-reduce. I can't ignore this one because, well, actually, I don't know. I don't know if I need to ignore that or not. But if re-reduce, so if re-reduce is the same as this case, so then I need to go over all of the value. In this case, I can definitely ignore the keys. So for values, turn result. Okay, so let's do the math here. Result dot sum plus equals converting value to stats. Yeah, that should be fine. I'm trying to think. So this is an unguarded type assertion. I think it will work. Because I'm pretty sure there's no possible way to pass something to this with reduce being true that wasn't generated from this function. I think this will work. If it crashes, then we'll know I was wrong. Slices dot min. It's not slices, is it? Yeah, it is. Okay. And what's happening here? Too many arguments. Have uint want s. Okay, what am I doing wrong here? Oh, maybe cmp.min. Probably not. It's slices.min. Is it? I'm so confused now. Let me look it up. It's a brand new function that was added to Go recently. I'm trying to remember where it is. Actually, you know what? I'm going to look up in the changelog. Go 1.22 change this. Oh, you know what? It's just min. It's just min. It's built in. It's min. There. Same for max. All right. And then I have to think about this. Am I doing this right? No, I'm not doing this right. I'm not doing this right. No, I am. I am doing it right. So I'm just confused about whether I'm iterating over the right thing. I am. So I'm iterating over values, which is a slice of empty interface. And then, so I should just convert this once, right? Instead of doing these inline conversions everywhere. Let's do it like this. Value equals v dot stats. And then I can simplify this a little bit. Makes it a little more readable, probably a little bit faster, maybe. It might be optimized away, I'm not sure. All right, so now for each, this isn't probably the most efficient because, suppose that I have 100 values in here. For each one, I'm calling min and max and so on. In theory, I could do min and max over the whole set at once, but that requires another conversion step. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I mean, this is meant for testing, so performance isn't that important. And before I would want to change this, I want to benchmark it and see if it actually is slower or not. Do count. Okay. And then sum square. Nope. Result dot sum square. Is that right? I think that's right. Okay. Now I want to look at these here. What is, so they're adding, I'm trying to understand what the 0, infinity, minus infinity, etc. are for. I think that's the starting value for the reduce function in JavaScript. I'm not really familiar with that. What arguments does it take? It's the initial value, and it's optional. Okay, yeah, so that's the initial value. All right. Don't really have an equivalent in Go, so it doesn't matter. All right. So we have the reduce case handled. Now the other case where let me see how they do it here. Do they ever look at key? I don't think they do. So I never need to worry about the keys for this particular function. All right, so I can actually, yeah, so I've already have result defined. Okay. Result.sum. That's not right. It shouldn't be the length. It should be the sum of those values. Is there a function that does that? I'm not sure. Sum. I don't know if that actually exists. I don't think it does. All right, so return result. Okay, now that's going to break both test cases because I'm only setting sum in that case. But let's do the others here first. Result.count. Yeah, okay. Actually, I can do that slightly more efficiently with result.count equals, yeah. So I can set that just all at once there. And for the square root, or not square root, but the square of, I need to do some additional stuff here. Actually, it's not that hard. Yeah, that's actually easy. You think it's going to work? Who thinks it's going to work? Not me. Let me clear this. All right, so both cases are failing. I'm not sure why. I am sure why. Okay, so sum was wrong in the first case. I just wrote it wrong. It should be 2, duh, because 1 plus 1 equals 2 instead of 1. So that solves that one. Now, the other one is interesting. The problem here is min is being calculated wrong because we compare it against the 0 value also, which is not ever going to be correct. Let me think how I could solve this in the wrong file. What I really want is, well, I have 2 solutions. One is to convert all of these values into uint64s before I call min, and I can call min on all of them at once, rather than passing in result.min, which is 0 initially. But that's not really the right solution because it won't handle floating point variables, and it won't handle negative values for that matter. If I do floating point, I could essentially do what they do and use infinity here, or minus infinity. I'm trying to decide how I want to handle this. I'm gonna be strict with my TDD here, and I'm going to use the simplest solution to solve the problem at hand, which is to iterate over these first. So let's do this. I'm going to call invals for numeric vals. I'll probably change the name. All right. Now I have invals has all of the values in it already converted to uint64s. Hi, Marius. Welcome. So now I think I can do result.sum. No, I want result.min equals slices. Is that even a function? It looks like it is. Okay. Max equals slices.max. Okay, I can delete those. That might solve that particular problem. It's still inefficient because I'm running over both. Well, that's weird. Let's try that again. Okay, it's still failing. Yeah, there's not a sum value there, so I can't really do it like that, but that's okay. So I still, I can go over invals though here now. So I still have to loop over it again. Well, I don't have to. I can move this up to this function or this loop. So I only have to loop once. But it still isn't working, and I'm not sure why. So min is returning 0 when I expect 1. Oh, I do know why. I do know why. It's because I'm passing in. No, I don't know why, because this is for the first case up here. Is it related? Oh, it's probably related to this re-reduce case. Yeah, that's what it is. So I need to do the same trick up here. It's kind of annoying. Hopefully I come up with a better solution, but I'm going to do it anyway. So what I want here, what I need to do is loop over values and come up and create a list of mins. Wait, is it a list? No, I'm just comparing against a single. Wait a minute. No, I need to loop over values and come up with a list of, mins and maxes. Yeah, that's what I have to do. Mins make maxes. That's not really spelled correctly, but I don't want to add an E there and make it not look the same. So, and then rather than calling min max here, I do mins and maxes, blah. Okay. Now here I can do result dot min. Yes. That should solve it, I think. Yes. All right. So the first case is unbroken now. Now I still need to unbreak the second case. I expected the second case to be broken, in particular because I'm passing in a negative value right here, but I'm using a uint. So I need to stop using a uint. I need to start using an int, right? Let's do that. So all of these, so sum could be negative, min could be negative, max could be negative, count cannot be negative, sum square root cannot be negative, or square cannot be negative. So those are okay. But now I need to convert these to ints, and let's do int. The harder part, the more difficult part here is going to be this toUint thing, because I don't want to do toUint anymore. I want to do toInt. So I'm going to, I don't know if I have one of those already. toInt 64, I do not. So I'm going to copy and paste and then change. Let's make this toInt 64, not ont, int 64. Converts the input to a int 64. If the input is malformed, it returns an error with a message, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So let's, I don't need to check the sign in this case because it's fine. Yep. Turn T nil. Why is this complaining? Oh, because I need to change this. All right. All right, so there's an interesting case here. I could have, let me see if I have a test already for this. Options test. I do not. So there's a case where a uint converting a uint 64 to an int 64 can be lossy, and I want to catch that case. So I need to get to that in a second. But first, let me finish the rest of the function. If I have a string, I do a parse. Okay. If I have a float 64, float 32, float 64. Oh, I forgot to put these nils in here. All right, so that function should work except for this case of potential data loss, but I'll worry about that in a moment. I want to get my test passing first. All right. There should be two int 64. And now this needs to be two int 64. And let's see how we're doing here. What's next? All right. Okay, I think the negative case is handled now. It is. I need to remove that to-do list about negative values. Make stats work with negative values. Okay. Let's address this quickly. So I don't actually have a test around this function yet, or the previous one that I copied. I should. So let's do it. I need to copy some boilerplate. Apparently, the Apache license requires you to include this header on the top of every source file, which I think is super annoying. But I wanted to use the Apache license because it's the same that CouchDB uses. So anybody using CouchDB can definitely use the same library without worrying about licenses. But it means I have to do that silly nonsense. Func test to int 64. Let's make a tests struct with name, input, interface, and then the value I want. No, it returns an error too, doesn't it? So let me put want error string there also. I'm not going to worry about the error right now. We'll just do a fatal. Because I don't care about it for the particular case I'm testing right now. Unexpected result. Got %v, want %v. Okay, that should work. And then I'll just put a really simple test case here to validate that the test works. Int 64 input. So, name input int 64 1 2 3 want 1 2 3. Okay. Oh, it needs I forgot that it takes another argument that I don't care about in this case. So I'll just pass an empty string. All right, good enough. So that's working. You might be wondering why it takes this extra argument. It's a custom error message that's used when an error message has to be returned back to the user of the API. I don't know if this to int 64 ever actually needs that, but I'm going to leave it in there for now until proven otherwise. Or yeah. All right. So let's handle the case that is that I expect to be broken. That would be uint 64 overflow. Yep. Okay, let me think. Yeah, I think that's right. No, it's not. So the thing is, I want a really large uint 64 that's not representable as an int 64, and this should be it. There, that's what I want. Max uint64. Let's try that. There we go. Actually, what I want is an error. So I need to put this want error thing in here. I forgot that. What I actually want is for it to fail. So want error. I don't know what the error should say yet. So just put XXX as a placeholder. Let me figure out how I want to do this. This is one of the most awkward parts of error testing in Go is you have to figure out how to do this thing. Error does not equal nil. Error message, blah. Okay. Okay. So what I've done is I create this variable to hold the error string. If the error is not nil, I set it to error.error. If it is nil, then it will be the empty string. Then I can compare it against the error I want. So I'm just doing string comparisons, right? Now it should fail because I'm not getting an error when I should. So let me think now about what kind of error I want this to return. Where's that to do? Here it is. So this should. Now first I need to detect if it's that large. So let me do. I need to add two cases here. One that fails and one that doesn't. Large uint that does not overflow. So this would be max int 64 represented as a uint 64. This one should succeed. Want. Yeah, I think that'll work. That one should work in both cases. Yes, it does. So now the goal is to make sure I don't break this case when I fix this one. All right. So I think I want to do if. Yeah. If t is greater than math int 64, then I return this error message. Bad request. And that's where that error message that I pass in comes into play, apparently. Yeah, that's where it comes into play. So I'm going to just put in error. It doesn't matter. For now, it doesn't matter. I think that'll fix it. Yeah. All right. Fix potential overflow in. It's not fix, more like detect. Overflow in to int 64 function. All right, good enough. All right, now I feel good about that. I still don't have this thing fully covered with tests. It's pretty obvious code. I mean, it's possible that I have a typo in here somewhere. So in theory, I should cover all the tests someday, perhaps. Let's get back to this. Let's do a floating point values because that's going to break this whole thing all over again, right? With floating point values. So let's do 1.223 and minus 1.23. Why not? So now my sum should still be 0. Min should be minus 1.23. Max should be 1.23. Count should be 2. And the sum of square root, that's going to change now. 1.23 squared times 2. That should be my new square root thingy. Or no, I keep saying square root. Square. All right. Now this is going to fail, obviously, because I'm not using floating point numbers anywhere. All right. So, you know what this means is that 2 int 64 I just created, I might not have needed because now I need a 2 float 64. All right. Well, baby steps. Now I need floating point for both of these, even though there's no such thing as a U float. Yeah, that's fine. And now everything's broken. All right. These become float 64s. Float 64. Float 64. I don't think I need that anymore, actually. But I do need a 2 float 64. So we're going to do this again. And I'll probably end up deleting that 2 int 64 thing, since I probably don't need it anymore. 2 float 64. Input to a float 64. If the input is malformed, turns an error. Okay. Let's change this. Float 64. Da, 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 da. Now, an interesting thing about this is floats are inherently lossy. I forgot to leave that to-do comment earlier, didn't I? I'm going to do that now, even though I'm probably going to delete it in just a second. Let me delete that. I'm going to commit just that change. Okay. I don't like this, but let me delete this temporarily. There, now I can commit just that change. Now I undelete this. Now we'll continue. So float 64s are inherent, floats of any size 64 to 32 are inherently lossy. And you can't really detect that. I mean, I guess I could detect that, but I don't know if I care to detect that. This becomes parse float. And this takes a different set of arguments, string and bit size. Bit size is just 64. Okay. Yeah, so here I was I was checking that. I failed to do that. No, I was doing that. So I am checking if when I was converting from a float to an int, I was checking if it was equal. I'm not sure if I care about that. I think in this case I just want to return. In this case, just return t nil. So I have to decide if I ever care about the precision loss here, and I don't think I should. And one reason I say that is because this is using JavaScript, which is already using floats, essentially 56s. So the fact that I'm passing this through a JavaScript function means I'm already losing precision. So I mean, there is still potential to lose precision because I could be adding, if I have a bunch of really large numbers coming from JavaScript, I'm adding them together or multiplying them in the case of the square function, I can still lose additional precision, but not any more than the user would expect by virtue of using JavaScript. So I'm not going to worry about this. There still is the potential for a failure right here. Although this only matters if it comes from a user. And I may use this function for users in the future, but I don't need it right now. So what I'm going to do, I don't know if I want this whole function at all, come to think of it. These functions were written, these two int64 and so on, the uint64 I wrote to parse query parameters that are passed from a user here. So I'm kind of abusing it already. Which makes it, I'm just gonna delete this. All that work I just did, I'm gonna delete now. And I'm gonna do it differently. I'm gonna just use a float 64 everywhere. Well, the thing is, so I have. No, I'm not quite going to delete that. I just changed my mind. because what I'm doing is I'm taking input from that is passed from JavaScript. So essentially what I want to do, query parameters is the wrong idiom to be thinking of. I need to be thinking of JavaScript variables, and I want to treat a number or a variable the same way JavaScript would if we're treating it as a number. And I think this does that pretty well. The truth is, I'll only ever get float 64s probably from JavaScript. I have to think about that. I wonder if I even need all of this stuff, or if I can just assume a float 64. I might need to look that up in the documentation for the JavaScript library or runtime I'm using, which is called Goja. It's a pure Go implementation of a JavaScript runtime. Find the Go doc. Is it to value or from value? I don't remember. I want the opposite of this. Is it export? Export to numeric type. So I suppose I could get either floats. I think it was floats. This isn't telling me exactly. Exporting to numeric types uses a standard ECMAScript conversion operation, same as used when assigning values to non-clamped type array. I don't know what that means. But I guess the most important thing is I could have strings, and I need to basically parse those strings into numbers, since that's what JavaScript would do. So that's what this does. And I could have an error there, technically. What should I do? I'm going to add that to my to-do list. Reduce returns non-numeric value. I don't know what that should do. I have to see how CouchDB handles that. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to stick with this for the moment. It's not probably what I want, but I'll know better once I investigate this. Then I figure out how to do the error handling. But for now, this should work. Let's finish making it compile to float 64. All right. Looks like it's compiling. Got sidetracked enough. I don't know if my test's going to pass. It does pass now. All right. Work. Stats works with float 64s. All right, so let's think about or figure out, do the investigation to figure out what I need to do for non-numeric values, because that will help me decide if I can simplify my to float 64 significantly. I think well, the thing is that JavaScript will treat that as a, just like if it's the word dog, it'll treat it as 0, right? So maybe that's what I do. Let me pull up my console here. See if I can remember how developer tools work. Is this my console? No. Where do I get my console? I'm so terrible at this. Show console drawer. Console right there. Let x equals 3 plus dog. That's not what I want. Let x equal dog times 3. Not a number. How do I coerce a string into a number in JavaScript? I don't remember how to do that. Well, not a number is a reasonable answer too, I suppose, but x equal dog 1, 2, 3 dot sum. Does that work? All right. How do let me copy what I saw in the documentation here. Let x equal 1, 2, 3.5 dog. And then x dot reduce. And let's just copy this. Not a number. Okay. See if I get rid of dog, if that fixes it. Still not a number. Is that the wrong array syntax, maybe? No, that looks like an array. Oh, it's trying to do b plus sum. That's not what I want. Let's try like this. There we go. Now let me add dog back. Let's see what it does. Okay. Well, that's obviously not the right behavior, even if that's what JavaScript does. I don't know if CouchDB would do exactly the same thing. In fact, I'm sure it wouldn't, because it actually is implemented in Erlang. So I guess I need to just try it and see if I can make it happen, right? So let's do it. I think I have CouchDB running in Docker. I do. So let's see, curl. Seven. All right. I'm going to create a new. I already have a design doc called foo. Let's see what's there. All right, let's update this one then. So I'm gonna the same design document I created, the view and reduce I created in my test. I'm going to create the same one in the actual CouchDB, so I can test how it works against the reference implementation. All right, so I want this without new lines. Let's just edit it here. I need to specify the correct structure. So we have views, var, map, and that's, whoops, well, that's, reduce stats. Let's see if that works. Looks like it did. Foo, design, foo, view, var. All right, so I got no results, but I think it's because none of my documents have the key. Let's create a new document. We'll call this document I forgot to put quote marks around value. All right, and then let's do another one. It's 34. Why not? And And we'll do another one. His value is dog. Getting there. All right, let's see if we get a different result now. Still the wrong thing. There, we get an error. The stats function requires that map values be numbers or arrays of numbers, not dog. Okay, that answers the question. Now we get to write a test for it. Stats with non-numeric values. Dog. Now I don't want a result. Well, no, it is a result actually. No, it's not. It's an error. So want error. I want the error. I actually want to copy it to be. It's not going to be exactly the same, but it's going to be similar. So I'm going to use lowercase because that's Go standard, and I don't want these extra like brackets around it. I want it to just look like normal stuff. That's kind of weird. Want status. It should be bad request, I think. Was that bad request? No, it's internal server error. I think that's a bug in CouchDB. Well, is it? It's bad input, but it's not bad input from this request. So I think internal server error probably is right. Because bad request implies that the person who made the request, the client that made the request, can correct the problem, and they can't in this case. The whoever created the view needs to, or the reduce function needs to fix it. Anyway, so the stats function requires that map values be numbers or arrays of numbers, not dog. All right, good enough. This is going to fail because it returns something rather than dog, rather than, yeah, that error. But that's good. So, I actually want this to fail here. Is it not? Okay, I'm ignoring the error. So I don't know how to. This is an interesting case because the stats function is built into CouchDB. It's not actually implemented in JavaScript, even though all the other, these built-in ones are built in. So they can return errors, even though the standard function cannot. So I actually need to do some architectural changes here to make this work. So we're going to commit this, add failing test for invalid input to stats function. And by the way, I just saw a question on chat. I'm sorry, it looks like it's been there 20 minutes or 10 minutes. So I'm sorry I didn't see it earlier. What are we building today? Yeah, I talked about this at the beginning, but I see a lot of people, a number of people, I don't know how many, a number of people have joined since I started. I'm adding, how much detail to go into? I'm adding some capabilities to my own sort of CouchDB, my own CouchDB, I don't want to say mock, but like implementation. I'm implementing CouchDB for the purpose of testing. So I need to add a certain number of features that will allow you to test a CouchDB app without running CouchDB. So you can just run it in Go. So that's what I'm adding. And I'm adding this stats feature. It's a reduce function. It's described here in the CouchDB documentation. So this is kind of my reference, sort of the RFC, if you will, and then I have CouchDB running as a reference implementation. So that's what I'm doing today at a really high level. I did talk about it in much greater detail. If you want to jump back, maybe watch the replay. You can watch the first maybe 20 minutes to get a lot more details about it. All right, so I need to refactor this. So here's the problem. We find the right window. So these reduce functions have a very specific signature that looks like this, right? It has 3 arguments: keys, values, and re-reduce. Keys is null in the case of if re-reduce is true, and so on. So I have this function called re-reduce func that returns that function. It has that very signature. The problem is now I need a function, a reduce function that returns an error. but none of the official ones do that. But I think actually this isn't as big of a problem as I thought. I'm going to add error here. Basically, it's really easy to do this, isn't it? Now that I think about it, I just most of these or the user provided ones just will never return an error value, but that's fine. So nil, nil. Nil. It's much simpler. I don't know why I thought it would be more complicated. It's actually quite simple. It's this default case where I would thought it would be difficult, but it's not. It's not at all. It's already a wrapper. So here's where I actually call the JavaScript function. Actually, it can return an error. That's interesting. So what I might be able to do here, let me see how this is done. Map function throws an error. Okay, I thought I had a test about reduce throws an exception. Maybe I haven't done that yet. Well, there's one way to find out, a quick way to find out here. I'm going to undo what I just did. I'm going to change this text and see if a test fails. No. Okay. So I need to do that too. Let me add that to my to-do list. Unless it's already there and I just forgot about it. Where is my to-do list? Reduce function throws exception. All right, so the fact that I haven't written that test yet means that I don't have any particular expectations around how it works. This is interesting. Oh, okay. Well, what is it returning from here? I'm actually a little bit confused here. Oh, okay. So it's not this isn't. Wait, it is. Where is it returning this function to? I'm actually quite confused now. I'll return this. Oh, it's just returning the error as an interface, which probably is wrong. So like the reduced value is the error. That's what it's doing. And it shouldn't be doing that. Okay, but I don't have a test for this yet, so I'll add one, and then I'll make sure that it's working correctly. But for now, I'm going to go back to add that error that I was starting to do. All right. So the goal is to add an error that's essentially ignored for the moment. All right, and this is the one. This is the case where the user. This is the normal case, where the users provided the function, which would be stored in this text here, and then this incantation here converts it into a JavaScript function and executes it here. So in this case, I'm just returning. Okay, I'm logging. I don't know why I'm logging it like this exactly. I think I should just return nil comma error. I'm going to comment that out for the moment because I know I'm going to add a test soon. And I want to use this as reference, but I'm not going to keep that. All right, now this is what I want. I have 3 places. That surprises me. I was expecting 1. Apparently 3 places where I'm calling reduce function, and it's returning an error that I'm not handling yet. So anyway, for now, I can just do this. I don't know if I'm going to do that though. So here, yeah, okay. So here's the error. So we have these 3 places where an error can be returned. And if I get one, I want to do something with it. But what? No, I don't want to return that. What I want to do, well, maybe I do. Let me try that and see what happens. I'm not sure if I have all the boilerplate put in place to turn this return error into the right response format I want, but let's see. If the test passes, then I do. If it doesn't, then I don't. Reduce function throws an error. Okay, I do have a test for that. I just couldn't find it for some reason. Reduce function return. It says throws an error. It should say exception. I would have found it if it had. All right, so this is the function that was testing for that capability before, and now it's not. Well, it is, but it's failing. How is it testing it here? I don't see what it's testing for. What the heck? Why am I so confused? So I suppose I had tested this before and discovered that in that case, it didn't abort the transaction or didn't abort the processing. It just logged it. So maybe the thing is, this return error doesn't make any sense now. I'm also not testing for the log output, which I should be doing. I should have a want logs here that test for the right thing. Okay, I'm just going to put nil here. That's not what I want, but I'm trying to I want to focus on one thing at a time. All right. So let me fix this test, and then I'll get on. Reduce function through exception. Okay. Hi, Dennis. Then I want this at reduce. Basically, I need this 4 times. All right. Okay, so that test is working again for now. The non-numeric one is not. Still not getting an error that I expected. but then I wouldn't expect that yet because I haven't started telling it to return anything, right? So that's what happens here. I've got too much going on in my head right now. Let me see what I've got in my working copy. I feel like I need to fix that. I need to fix this test first. That's what I'm going to do. Let me copy this. I'm going to clear my working copy. Okay. I'm going to ignore that test because I'm not worried about that one right now. I want to fix the one that wasn't testing properly for the exception. And what I mean by that is, see this test? There's nowhere here that it positively asserts that an exception occurred. I'm throwing an exception right here, but nowhere am I asserting that is actually what happened. I just kind of, I guess, imply that it works anyway, but I want to positively assert that happens. That's what this does. All right. Update, reduce exception test to positively assert that exception was handled. All right. So now that that's out of my way, I can go back and redo for the third time, adding this error. Just hate mixing those concerns. I mean, it's not so much that the Git history is messy, although that's part of it. It's just that, like, in my head, I feel like I've got too many plates spinning at once. So that's one thing I like about TDD is it makes it a lot easier to focus on one thing at a time. I don't know if it makes it easier. It reminds me to. So there's this weird case right here that I'm not handling right now. And that is if I get a non-exception. So basically, if I get an error after calling the JavaScript reduce function, then I check to see if it's an exception. If it is, then I do the right thing. If it's not an exception, then I do this. The thing is, I don't know if it ever would be not an exception. Now I'm thinking about that. Let's see if that's even possible. All right, call version JavaScript call from go. Okay, I want to know what the error might be. I guess I might have to just look at the implementation. Let's see how this works. The method will panic with an exception. Which method is this? I don't care about that one right now. Exporting a function creates a strictly typed gateway. Let me remember how I created this thing. I call it assert func. Okay. I don't know what this would ever be. I also don't know if I care. Like, can I not just treat all errors as exceptions? Okay, once again, I'm going to undo this work. And I want to solve this because this is really confusing me. I want to decide how I want to handle this. I really think that the only possible way to get an error here is for there to be an exception. This returns a function. Okay, where does this error come from? Run wrapped. We can get a panic. I hate these naked returns. Makes it so hard to read what's going on. So there's an implied ERR here, but it's not there. So you have to know that. So it could be it's exceptions all the way down. It looks like that's the only option. So I'm going to. I don't want to save that. I want to assume that this is always an exception. What I don't know is if I can just let's just try this and see if the test passes. Let's see if this is a valid simplification. It did not pass. So the output is different now. It's arguably better. Basically, the new line is removed, it looks like. So now I get got reduced function through exception error broken at reduce all in a single line. I don't think that's a problem. I think that's actually better. So I'm going to update this test to match that. I think like this is all it is, yeah? Yeah. It's actually slightly more readable, I believe. Fewer extraneous lines in the log output. And one more. Yeah, I like that better. Whoops. Treat all errors as exceptions. Errors from reduce func as exceptions. Now, I might want to do the same thing for my map functions, because I have similar logic here. Yeah. Let me add that to my to-do list. I'm not going to do that right now since it's not standing in my way, but you see here when my map function has an exception, I do the same sort of check, and I do some recovery if it's an exception, and I don't do that recovery. Well, actually, I just early abort in the other case, but which would probably be fine too. I don't think it'll ever happen, but I'm going to add it to my to-do list and handle that another day. Put it down here at the bottom. All right. Now, back to the problem at hand, which is making this test pass. So once again, I'm going to add error value here. Once again. Is this what, 4 times, 5 times? I think it's the 4th. Doop-a-doo, doop-a-doo. It's rote, but it's easy. And here's the one I actually was having so much trouble with. All right. So I still want to leave this like this because apparently, based on the reference implementation of CouchDB, when it's a user-defined function that returns an error, it handles it this way. It logs it. But when it's a built-in function that returns an error, it needs to do something special with it. And what is that? So let me look at the output again if it's still in my buffer. I don't know if it is. Please, here it is. Nope, that's not it. Where is it? Where is it? Here it is. So it just returns an error. So that should be easy to do. Whoops. Well, let's see what happens here. I'm pretty sure this doesn't work, and I'm not sure why yet. Oh, actually, I do remember why it doesn't work because I hadn't finished implementing it. But you know what? I think it's worth adding some documentation or a comment here. According to the ref, let's find function throws an exception. I don't know if the reduce value set to null. That's actually probably something to check. Well, I'm setting it to null. All right, I'm going to add it to my other to-do list also, since I'm not 100% sure that was the correct behavior. All right. Actually, I don't need it to do in two places. I'll just leave it there. Okay. All right. So now I have the ability to, but I'm not taking advantage of, to return an error in stats. So let's do that. Let's make it return an error now. So that would be here. Error does not equal nil. Return nil error. All right. We got an unexpected error. Now it's blank, but that's because I passed blank here. And unexpected status 400. I actually want that to be 500, but I need to. So the reason it says 400 is because I assume that the two float 64 and all the other ones I've done assume that invalid input is a 400 error. But as I just discussed, in this particular case, it should be treated as a 500 because it is invalid input, but from a different user, right? From the admin, not from the person making the query. So I need to promote that to 500 status, which is done like this. Actually, there's a couple different ways to do that. Considering this is only used in this particular case, I could just update it here. I could make it an argument here. Okay, let me worry about the error message first. What did I want it to be? I wanted it to be this. fmt.sprintf not %s. Okay, let's put some quotes here. Blah, blah, blah. All right, now I get the correct error message. This isn't the most efficient way to do that because here I'm generating the error message by calling fmt sprintf, regardless of whether I'll actually need it. And of course, most of the time I won't need it, but it works, which is enough to make my test pass. Worry about making it fast later. Just a note to myself there. So that works. Now I need to worry about that error code. I don't know what I want to do here. I could just make the return a Boolean. There was a reason I didn't do that in the other case. I don't think I care about it here. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to make this a bool. And then true. So all the other options I was thinking of, I could make this pass in. I could pass in the status I want. But that seems like a lot of overhead for and silliness for something that's at the moment literally used only one place. So I'm going to just do it like this. And this will solve the other problem at the same time. If not okay. Now I can do return. Now that FMT sprintf is only called when it's actually needed. And I can set the status directly. Passes. Let me make sure I cleaned up my to-do comment here. Yeah. La la la. Make stats return proper error when it gets non-numeric input. All right, I think I'm done for the day. I've got about 10 minutes left. So if there's any questions or comments, hi Anonymous, thanks for joining. Says he has to go. That's cool. Thanks for joining. Yeah, if there's any questions, I see there's only 2 people on the stream now, so I'm guessing not a lot of questions. But anyway, I had a lot of people on today. I got some good comments, so thanks for joining. I intend to pick this up again next week. I don't know if I'll be on the same. I mean, I'll be working on this project in the meantime, so I may not be at exactly the same point next week, but I'll be working on something probably related to Kivik next week. So I hope you can join me then. For everybody who's here, thanks. Yeah, I'll be signing off. I'm going to create this pull request and get this stuff merged. Push build. If I could, why isn't it working? Oh, I know why it's not working, because I put origin first. Muscle memory failing me. There we go. So I'll push this up, make a pull request, and get it merged. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you all next week or on LinkedIn or wherever in the meantime. Cheers.